All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Welcome in. We're going to just wait a couple minutes here to let more participants join us. So make yourselves comfortable. Pour yourself a nice hot beverage. Prepare yourself for a riveting conversation. I know the three of us are ready for it. So we'll see what happens. So we'll just wait a couple minutes and then we'll dive right in.
Hey, Jared, I thought you'd mentioned doing a song at this point.
Oh, the song.
Yeah. So this I think this is
It's after your poem,
cue the
isn't it,
song.
John?
Okay, well, yeah, that's coming after he does the song.
Oh, wait. Oh, we're already a mess. I thought the poem was coming first. Then the song. Okay, I got it wrong. Jeez.
That's my fault. I'm the MC, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
After the fact here.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. And for those of you who are just tuning in, welcome to the Global Immersion office. And this is literally what it's like. And the banter is, as you can imagine, wonderful. Hey, well, let's get moving together. I want to welcome you to part 3 of our Everyday Peacemaking in the Pandemic webinar series. And in part 1, we explored the interconnectedness as a global family and how this moment requires that we see beyond the borders and the boundaries and the binaries that have divided us. It was literally a riveting conversation. We had friends from Costa Rica, from Palestine, from Australia, and from the US, and they offered a really poignant analysis of this moment and what it tells us about our shared humanity. And so I want to urge you to give it a view. The link is going to pop up here in the comment thread in a few moments. As links populate in our comment thread, I want to just encourage you to go ahead and click them so that they populate in your browser so that you can return to them after the call, because once the call goes away or the webinar goes away, all of that data goes away too. And so that's probably the best way for you to capture that stuff. Part 2, with the invisibility of this virus and a growing uncertainty with regard to its reach and its impact, many of us are asking the question, how do we contend well right now? Put another way, how do we love our neighbors, especially the most vulnerable among us? That was the question that really informed part 2 of our webinar series. And we featured Maya Anita Smith of Lady Gaga's Born This Way Foundation, Terrence Lester out of Atlanta with Love Beyond Walls, and Morgan Schmidt with Pandemic Partners here in Central Oregon, actually in my city, Bend, as she has pioneered what's become a bit of a viral movement of what she calls crowdsourcing kindness. And it's an amazing initiative that's underway. Those 3 helped us really get our heads around the practicality of, like, what do we actually do? What can we do right now with regard to creative love? And here we are in part 3. Now, the fact of the matter is we don't have anything figured out. We have no prescriptions. We have one another. And as it pertains to today, we have our teams, we have our families, we have our communities, and we have a shared passion for human flourishing. And so our real hope in this 4-part series is that we get to explore what it means to be everyday peacemakers in the context of this unique moment. My name is Jared Swigert. I'm the co-founder of the Global Immersion Project. I live in Bend, Oregon, and Global Immersion forms communities of everyday peacemakers who join God and others in remaking the world. We see everyday peacemakers as women and men who see the humanity, dignity, and image of God in themselves and others, who immerse into conflict, or in this case, into pandemics, with the tools to transform, who contend not by getting even, but by getting creative in love, and who restore all the broken things, from internal to interpersonal to the systems that crush people. Why do we do what we do as an organization? Because we believe that restoration is the mission of God, and that peacemaking is not an add-on to our faith. It's the essence of it.
And hello all. My name is Alejandra Ortiz. This is not my normal voice. If you're curious, I'm a bit sick, but I'm really happy to be here with you all. I am a special advisor to our Borderlands work and the lead curator of the Tijuana San Diego immersion trips. And I live in Playas, Tijuana, right across the border from San Diego. And this is my office now too. So I want to orient you a bit about the Zoom webinar format if you're not familiar with it. There is a comment section, and as some of you have already done it, please type your name, where you're from, what brought you to this conversation, and please feel free to populate the comment thread throughout the conversation so we can connect with one another. Um, Ask questions. We will go into a Q&A section, and we will do our best to bring those questions up during the conversation. This is going to be maybe a different format than what you are used to, because we are going to have a conversation between the three of us, and as part of the Global Immersion team, as people who are peacemakers and who we're trying to figure out what does it mean to live in this situation. We're going to have an honest conversation with you all, and we are basically in this context trying to sort out what it means to live, to love, to lead as peacemakers in the midst of the pandemic. And after this conversation, we will offer space so that we can hear out the questions, the comments, and come into conversation with you all. So yeah, so we're very happy to be here.
Ole, I think you're done, but my internet is acting really funky. Can you guys hear me okay? You can.
Yeah, we can, John.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. If it gets weird, one of you two jump in. So yeah, thanks, Jared and Ole. For us, again, my name is John Huckins. I'm a co-founding director of Global Immersion alongside Jared there. And San Diego is my home, and live close, about 13 minutes from the border. And get to see this as our binational context. But it's really interesting, even in this moment, you know, Ale is just on the other side of that border in Tijuana. Borders are being closed in this, and understanding where we fit is different than any other moment. And so I think that just underscores what Jared mentioned earlier. There's no formula for how to navigate the highs and the lows of this pandemic, and we don't want to pretend like there is. This is a new crisis. It's new territory. Collectively, we are all figuring out what it means to live as everyday peacemakers. And while this crisis is new, what's not new is our invitation, our call to live a way of life that looks like being peacemakers in the midst of the beautiful and the broken of our world. And so for us, again, not approaching this as if we have this crisis figured out, but this is a way of life we're all committed to. And we want to create a space to say, hey, where are the major obstacles to living this way of life right now in this moment that we need to feel safe about? And I think a lot of us, you know, the last few weeks for our team has been in conversation with many of you, trying to figure out how to show up in faithful ways in this moment. And it has not been, it's been anything but easy. And we want to create a space where there's a safety to say, this is a struggle. We're uncertain. We feel fear. We feel anxiety. There are some mustard seeds of restoration that are growing in the midst of the weeds of this pandemic, if you will. But it's not all that. In fact, it feels a bit like the restoration side. At times it feels too early to talk about it, as if we're glossing past the tragedy of this moment. Or other times the restoration pieces just seem too ambiguous and too far out that we're not sure exactly where to go. And so we want to, as we were preparing for this webinar, we want to be honest about where we are, and the anxiety, the confusion, the fear, the beauty, the hope, the new life on our streets, in our homes, around our world, speaking as practitioners who are navigating this ourselves. And so let's jump into that conversation. And Ollie's going to kick us off. First, you know, this is broken into two pieces: our obstacles to living as everyday peacemakers, and the opportunities of living as everyday peacemakers in this moment. Ollie is going to kick us into that conversation around the obstacles.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks for that. Yeah, as we know, I want to start with sharing a bit of what I've discovered that are major obstacles for me in particular, in terms of seeing the humanity, the dignity, the image of God in others. And I think we know this, but in this time, I've come to a bigger realization that everything that we see is actually mediated by things, right? But in this particular moment, the fact that a lot of the seeing is done through social media, through things like this, has gotten me even more aware of that reality, and that of course becomes an obstacle, because I am very aware of the fact that I can we know this. We know that we can decide what to see, what not to see, what we actually are. We've been formed into seeing, not seeing. But in this particular moment, it comes to actually turning on my phone or choosing what to read, what not to read, who to attend to, who do I listen to. And I think one of the things is, with all this pandemic thing going on, it's really easy to actually focus on myself. And I've been really, I'm not someone who's usually fearful. I'm not someone who's scared of things. I actually like things that have become a challenge. And I like challenges, and I go with everything I have. But I think I've come to realize that I was scared, and that was something that I was not expecting, and actually caught me off guard. And I've seen how this becomes something that that becomes an obstacle to seeing. It could also be an opportunity. We can talk about that. But in this particular moment, I started to see that I was focusing a lot on how I was feeling and my own self-preservation. And I wasn't actually seeing others who were close to me or who were far, but I could have access through social media with them, because I was actually not tuning in to what was happening inside me, but only being very, and like being really incapacitated by the feelings, by everything that was going on. So basically, I'm seeing the obstacle of how anxiety, in my case, which is something I don't experience much, has not helped me to see others who are around me. It was a moment when our daughter, after like a week of a lot of staying at home, was suddenly very irritated, and we were all seeing that at home. But we were like, why is she acting up like this? And then later at night, we were like, well, she's actually just showing us that that's how we are all feeling, but we haven't even had a time to go and to stop and to recognize what's going on inside of us. And I think an obstacle as peacemakers is always the not stopping to see what's happening in us, not recognizing our own fears, our own opinions, our own biases, the fact that we sometimes are completely unaware of what's how we contribute to the fear of others, to all of this. And I think that's something I'm experiencing in a totally different way this week, these 2 weeks. And one last thing is that I started to recognize that with everything that I've been hearing from social media, as I see others, I was seeing others with suspicion. And that was really hard to recognize, because as we're hearing everything, they're talking about that the other can carry something. And I'm like, no, this is not what I believe. I think there is a risk of what we recognize, but the other is not someone who can hurt me in that sense. It's someone who I want to come in solidarity with. So what do I need to do to actually see them as people who are created in the image of God, and not go into this self-preservation mode, or this closing up in my own anxiety and fears. So that's been some of my obstacles around seeing that I've been sharing, that I wanted to share.
Thanks, Ollie. Appreciate your transparency in this, and I resonate with a lot of it. We're walking through our everyday peacemaking practices, again, saying this isn't a formula, it's a way of life, and that has never been more true. We talk about seeing, as Ollie was sharing, seeing the humanity, the dignity, the image of God in everyone, and what's the stuff that's getting in the way of that. And for me, I'm moving us towards the second practice, which is immerse, and that's really a proactive movement toward conflict, pain, brokenness, division, with tools to heal and to transform, rather than with tools to win or to destroy. And immersion is a lot about proximity, and it's about moving in and through hard stuff that makes us uncomfortable. And so as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about it through a few different lenses. Personally, immersion, obstacles to immersion in this moment have been pretty steep for me. It's easy when I feel stressed out to just create more stuff to do. Some of that's my personality. Some of it, I think, is a nervous function, to feel like I can create a sense of control and normalcy in a moment that's not that. And And what I found is when I do that, it makes me almost frenetic and disconnected from what's going on inside myself, and not to be able to immerse into my own sense of rootedness and identity. And this last week, immersion on a personal level has forced me to reconcile and to acknowledge some major realities of anxiety as well, like you were sharing, Ale. I mean, anxiety is something I've wrestled with for years and have been really proactive, and this season has triggered a lot of that. And so I feel like a lot of my work personally in regards to immersion is creating space to be proactive, to immerse into my own brokenness. What does it mean to find peace and stillness and presence, rather than just fall victim to this kind of frenetic pace in different ways, because this is a different season. You know, Sammy Awad on our webinar last week said, this virus can kill our humanity. It not only kills humans, it can kill our humanity. And there's something about an obstacle in this moment, for me personally, immersing into my own brokenness. If I don't, it could actually kill my humanity. I just become robotic and stressed and fearful, rather than engaged and curious and leading with vulnerability and transparency. And so that's on a personal level. Neighborhood wise, I mean, the social distancing thing has been really, really weird and hard. And I actually would love to hear some questions come up about this and hear how we're all navigating it, because for us as a team, we're really talking about there's a bit of a dissonance here. There's a tension we have to hold, and an obstacle right now when we're talking about immersing in our neighborhood. It's about proximity, and that proximity is an antidote to this hero complex that just has us sitting back on our social media saying all the answers to other people's problems, or to being disconnected from our pain of the world because we don't have proximity with the impacted, so we can just have a blind eye. It's privilege. It's walking away from other people's pain. And proximity is the antidote to both that, to that disembodied activism and to being disconnected from the pain. But now we have this social responsibility to be distant for the sake of slowing this virus, while also saying yes to a call of Jesus that says we move towards one another, especially the marginalized and the vulnerable. And so this has, in my mind, like, this obstacle has to be confronted on our streets, in our closest relationships. And I was telling the team yesterday, this weekend, our friend, who is a neighbor, and she's undocumented, and she came up to our door and came in to give me a hug. And it was this awkward moment of, we need to be socially distant, but we also need to be connected. And she had also come to share the struggle that they're going through financially and the need to support. And what does it mean to be socially connected to her and her family in this moment, but also to be socially or physically distant for the sake of a social responsibility? And it's an obstacle. And my daughter's turned 7 this weekend, and she can't see her friends, and she's a social butterfly. And so how are we navigating that obstacle of connecting? And for us, what it looked like is calling our neighbors and saying, hey, will you stand on your patio with a banner, a dance party or something? And as we go around on our scooter parade, we celebrate her from a distance. And it was sacred and beautiful and sad and hard. And there's a dissonance there. And so the obstacles seem high when it comes to immersing in our neighborhood. Love to hear you guys interact with that. Last thing I'll say on a global level, again, personal, neighborhood, global, I think it's really easy to be overwhelmed right now by the pain of all. This is an interdependent, this is a global family pandemic, and we can be paralyzed. And so instead of reaching out to one or two people that need us to reach out to them on the other side of the world, I feel like I need to be reaching out to 30. And so then I don't reach out to anyone. And that creates isolation in myself and isolation from those who need support and solidarity right now. And so I think that level of overwhelm has been a significant obstacle for Merson on that level.
Thanks, John, both you and Ale, for that. I'm struck. I'm like overwhelmed a bit by the realities of the obstacles that you're sharing, because I just feel like you're reading my journal right now with regard to this, like the struggle to see myself right now, much less see others, and this idea of social distancing or physical distancing, and how that's actually interrupting some of the natural flows. I think even some of my natural disposition in terms of who I am as a human being, and with regard to that, it's like I don't necessarily want to get accustomed to relational distancing, or like I don't want that to become a new normal. I want it to be disruptive and this or that. Yet, how do we transcend it now? It's good stuff. I'm going to move us on to this third practice of everyday peacemaking called contend, and this is, from our point of view, this is where we don't get even, we get creative in love. And so much of our work is connected to interpersonal relationships and systemic injustice. And so in this particular case, it's not about getting even. It's literally about like, how do we get creative in love right now? And so there's some obstacles that I'm facing just personally. And so I want to just kind of walk through some of what I've been thinking about, because from my vantage point, contending or getting creative in love in the midst of this I feel like I have a pillowcase over my head and I have a fly swatter and I'm in a pitch black room trying to hit bats out of the air. It's like, I don't know. I have no idea what to do. This is unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I'll just own, like, as an Enneagram 8 who was groomed to be an alpha male and a hero, it is a very uncomfortable experience to be blindfolded in a room trying to swing at who knows what, recognizing that if we don't actually knock the whatever out of the air, like, people are literally going to be devastated. And it's not going to happen it's happening right now. And I'm not just talking physically, I'm talking about economically. I'm talking about people's mental health deteriorating. I'm talking about all of these things that are happening real time, and in other words, I think that there's a large percentage of the population of the United States, of Mexico, of Italy, of, all of that stuff is crumbling right now. And that makes someone like me very, very restless. And so what I can begin to do in those moments is I just can start to do anything or everything, which isn't helpful because it's exhausting to me. It's exhausting to the people in my life. It's actually disempowering. And eventually I'm just going to run out of steam. So I would say an obstacle is just recognizing in this moment that I've been groomed in a system that has positioned me as a privileged, recovering alpha male who responds to crisis in a particular way. And the way that I've been groomed to respond in this moment actually isn't that helpful. So I think I'd want to start there. I want to say, though, there are questions when things like this happen, or when a crisis or a conflict emerges. There are questions that I immediately ask, and then there are the other questions. And so I want to hit on, like, these are the questions that I immediately ask in moments somewhat like these. Number one, who has already been set up to suffer the most? What's the opportunity here? How do we get creative? Again, I'm an Enneagram 8, so these are the questions that I'm asking. 3, what tools do we already have in our hands that we can repurpose and deploy? Who do we partner with? How must we organize? How do we build momentum in service of the most vulnerable? Whose voices are we listening to right now? Whose cues are we taking? And then this is the big one, I think, for someone that looks like me and has been groomed the way that I have. When do I leverage and when do I lay down my privilege? Because there are moments to lay it down and there are moments to leverage it. And so those are some of the questions that immediately come to mind for me. But then there are the other questions, and this is where it starts to get tricky. Questions like, how will the isolation, inhibited movement, and the unknown of this change the entire game? How will this pandemic impact my family? What is homeschooling? And how do we do it well? What do we need in order to make it financially? Will my marriage survive this? How will this impact my work and the sustainability of our organization? What do we need to do in order to pivot our deliverables and our programs, serve well, and survive this, however long it is? So there's the first set of questions that for me are like the urgent, like, let's get after this together questions. And then the second set of questions are the very, very pragmatic, very personal questions that matter a ton. And so here are some of the obstacles that come up for me in that. I think this is a common obstacle held by the human family right now, and that is the tasks at hand. They're usurping my time, my attention, and my affection. I'm becoming consumed by my own reality, and it's making it challenging to be interruptible by the concerns of others. And so how do you get creative and love in a moment when I've got 3 kids at varying, stages of human formation that I'm trying to figure out, like how do I tend to Ava's formation and education, Anders and Soren, recognizing that I'm navigating this with my wife, and we're both also trying to work our jobs. And then by the end of the day, we're like, I don't even know if I have any energy to get creative with you, much less anybody else, So that's a common obstacle I think that many of us are facing. I think there are some more privileged obstacles that I want to identify. I'm giving my best energy to this new reality in my home, and by day's end, I don't want to get creative in love. That's a privileged obstacle that I'm working to transcend. Another one is that social distancing convinces me that I can't nor shouldn't do anything. So if I can't be close to people, well then, what really is there to do other than to just kind of bunker down and make sure that I'm taking care of those closest to me? A third, I think, privileged obstacle, I convinced myself that reading all of the things is the best possible thing for me to do. And it turns out that is not healthy for anybody's mental health in the moment. And I don't see many of us getting more creative because we're reading all the things on this particular pandemic. And so I think that my privilege is maybe the greatest obstacle for me to contending right now, to getting creative in love in this time. The last thing that I want to mention with regard to obstacles here is this. There's the questions that immediately come to my mind. There's the urgent questions that come to my mind. And then there's the questions that I suppress that are also creating obstacles for me for getting creative in love. Here are some of those questions. How am I doing? What if this is worse than it appears? What if I'm not enough? What if I fail? What if we don't make it, either as a family or as and I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but as an organization, think like, what if we don't make it? What if this lingers for a long time and we don't have the luxury of sitting here in webinar conversations like this anymore? Those types of questions I try to avoid, or I have a practice of avoiding. And those are the important questions, I think, that are actually helping me name like how I am, kind of what you were saying, Ale. Like it's a failure to see myself, and as I fail to see myself, then it becomes very challenging for me to see you and to contend well for you. And so I'll just kind of close with this. I think that I'm observing in myself that when I don't tend to that last set of questions, there's a cynicism, a self-righteousness, a critical spirit that begins to grow in me. And I'm recognizing in myself that self-righteousness, cynicism, it's actually the kryptonite to contending. So I had better tend to the questions I ignore while also contending to the urgent, imminent questions, so that I can get to the creative love questions in a way that I'm grounded. And so I'm struggling to do those things right now. So we have just offered a bunch in terms of obstacles to seeing, immersing, contending. I'm certain that those of us who are listening in, there's a lot maybe of resonance. There's maybe some different stuff going on. And I've been looking into the camera rather than looking at the comments. And so let's turn to some of your guys' questions, and maybe even between the three of us, some of the things that we heard in one another. Any of you guys want to jump in, John or Ale, anything you're seeing?
Yeah. Ollie, do you want to kick it off? Want me to kick it off?
You kick it off.
Okay. I think Ollie's question she put in the chat is the right one. It's a right brain question. How are people feeling as you listen to this? Not just necessarily what you're thinking cognitively, but what is it stirring us? What's going on in our bodies, in our minds, our hearts collectively? So jump in with that. I think as I hear both of you share, and as I read these questions, the pragmatics come up more than ever. It's so easy to move to the left brain to theoretical, and right now I just don't know exactly. I just don't feel like there's a lot of energy from any of us to just sit in theoretical land, because the realities of every day are so present. The tangible stuff of the kids are all around us all the time. The fear that we're carrying is from all of us. It impacts all of us. Emily's question about balancing, this soul care work and also being creative in love is a challenge. I know personally that's, I share it in mine. Like if I don't tend to my own soul, I feel like I just can my dysfunction just bleeds on my family and my neighbors in unhealthy ways. And so I think that's a really, really critical piece. And what practices do we have? Like for us, we're exercising with the family twice a day, and they're on their scooters, and Jan and I are running behind them or in front of them or around them. And Jan and I, my wife and I, are making sure we each have at least 10 minutes a day for centering on our own. We have a little closet that we go into, and we make sure we have that time. And if we don't do that, our circuits start blowing. And so, Emily, I'm with you on that. And I remember you yesterday sharing on our contemplative time with Haley what you're wrestling with and how to live this stuff out. So I think that's huge. Ollie, what else have you seen on here that you'd interact with?
Yeah. I mean, I see a lot the question of how do I create the space and the rhythms to actually care for myself, where to start in the midst of everything that we're feeling, what's going on. And I don't have a formula answer for that, really. And I have to share, like, in the midst of all this, my family's been sick. So we've been struggling with feeling even with less energy. And we want to do exercise. And in our minds, theoretically, it looks like, oh, we can create this rhythm where we exercise together, we come back, we prepare a meal. And then like reality hits you in the face, and we can't even get outside. We're feeling really awful. And there's so much uncertainty. So I think it has to come to the point in which we recognize what's going on inside of us. And the temptation we saw as a family with my husband was that we could easily ignore that because it was hard, it was painful. When it comes to fear, for example, it's really hard to actually sit down and recognize and pray the fear or cry the fear, because it puts us in tune with things that are really dark within us. At the same time, it's something we need to do as people, as peacemakers, as human beings, because it's from there that we're actually going to be able to love and serve love and serve others. And I think this is also a very unique opportunity to start from that point, to start with everything we're feeling that it's not okay, with recognizing our own brokenness, our own fear, our own limitations. That is a gift. It doesn't look like it, but I do think it's a gift in ways. And that would be my suggestion. That would look different for different people, but resist the temptation to not go inside of yourself. Yeah, and that would be the maybe the starting point, and maybe from there are other questions that open up, and I think questions and doubts are actually things that help us walk. They're not our enemies. I think in a good holistic spirituality, doubts, questions, fears are actually guides for us as we walk with God. So changing maybe our mindset around those things.
Mm-hmm. That's really good, Ale. I feel just for myself, this, like I'm reading Amy Churchill. I'm reading your comment right now, and I share your restlessness around, like, yeah, but like, where do we start? Like, we've got to do things and everything, and there's plenty to be done. There's a lot to be done, and I, if you haven't listened in on parts 1 and 2 of this webinar, I mean, part 2 of the webinar series, I think there were 80 practical ideas for what we can do from our living rooms, and they're like life-saving ideas. And so I'd encourage you to give that one a listen. And then part 4, that's going to happen on Thursday, is going to be a conversation about discerning what is ours to do. Okay, so if there's 80 things I can do, that could also overwhelm me, and I'm not going to do anything. So just the sheer quantity of things that are possible, how do I discern what's mine to do? Because there's something that's mine to do today, whether that's seeing myself, contending for a neighbor, figuring out how to continue to immerse with people in my life, utilizing tools like these or whatever it is, And so I just want to name that it's hard it's hard for someone like me to hold in tension uh, the I have to be rooted and centered in order to see, immerse, and contend well. Yet we also are recognizing over the last decade that this is the bedrock of everyday peacemaking. That this is where we begin to recognize who we are, and what's ours to do today. And if we're in this mental soul heart space of just simply surviving or like jumping the next obstacle or whatever, I don't know. And perhaps that's a distraction for us. Perhaps we actually do need to grow our lives smaller in the moment in order to be more savvy, intelligent, and compassionate in the way that we approach solidarity. So let's not just randomly do things. Let's make sure that we're centered and grounded, so that the things that we are doing are the things that we're supposed to be doing, and are the most effective. So
I want to
go ahead.
on Danny. I think that's a great question about finding rhythms, like oscillating between solitude and survival. I think that's depending on each person's life circumstance, that probably is different. So the solitude part is harder for me to find, and for many of us little ones in small spaces, but it's still a thing. And I know for us, again, my wife and I have made it a priority that we get that solitude. But what I've found is when I get to the solitude, I can still carry that survivalness into that space with me. That rather than it being this centered time of like actually excavating some of the things that are going on inside of me, I'm still just kind of buzzing in my head in survival mode. And so the practice has been, Emily tossed in Ruth Haley Barton's book, awesome, Invitation to Silence and Solitude, has been the practice of, what do I need to remove from my vision that's keeping me in this survival mentality, that's an obstacle to my ability to actually experience solitude in a way that draws me back to that source of love that you're describing. And like, so tangibly for me, I've only been allowing myself to look at certain, like the news, much less often, and certain ones. Like I've literally had to chuck some off my phone because it's stirring this survival mentality in me in ways that I'm becoming a slave to. And I found that in the last couple of days that the solitude has actually been a place of solace, not just continual survival. And so I think it's an interesting thing for us to think about, is how we protect ourselves from that survival mentality that can just make us more carnal, more concerned about safety. The idol of safety is something we talk about a lot, that Jesus didn't call us to be safe, he called us to be faithful. So if we can't even examine what faithfulness looks like in the midst of a pandemic, if we're only concerned about our safety, because all our survival mechanisms are being triggered by the barrage of content, info, fear that's being tossed at us. And it's not about being absent or ignorant, it's just about understanding our own capacity to handle that barrage.
I just want to talk really quickly. Emily asks about how about the practice of lament, and I want to share a bit about what's that meant for me. I teach a lot around this issue, and I think I wasn't able to do much lament when all of this started, because I wasn't, as I was sharing earlier, I wasn't even in tune with what was going on inside of me. I was just really, really overwhelmed. But I encourage you all that as we are all experiencing this that's happening, that we actually lean into the practice of lament. And that means different things for different people, but it's acknowledging a lot of our own limitations, acknowledging that we believe in a good God that is restoring his creation and that is inviting us into that, but that maybe we don't know what we need to do, that maybe we don't understand what he's doing in the midst of all this, and recognize all of that. So when I was actually talking about all this doubts and all this, it's actually incorporates the fact that we lament all of the brokenness within us, outside of us, what's going to happen, what's happening. Some of us, it means actually crying, and that is liberating and healing, but it can mean different things. And for a culture that is so used to just, Mexican culture is very different in so many ways from US American culture. We're much more fatalist, and we laugh at death. That's just how we deal with the fact that we can't control a lot of things. But when you're in a US American culture that believes that it has everything under control and you're suddenly experiencing this, I think you actually have to cope. You have to go in deep with that reality and lament it, because it's actually, it's not true. You've lived in an illusion. So it's important to recognize this.
Awesome. Such a good word. Ole's teachings on lament have been some of the most important in shaping of our organizational DNA in life. So, and especially in these moments, I think it's probably it is a practice that can often be either misunderstood or not understood at all. But it's one that's historic in our Christian tradition. And Ole, thanks for bringing that back to the fore. I want us to move to opportunities. And again, with the spirit of opportunity, not in a formulaic way, but here's some stuff we're paying attention to. Opportunity of being in the midst of a crisis as an everyday peacemaker. You know, some of the comments that, Amy, your questions leading international nonprofit, and all the questions are spot on, and we resonate with most, if not all of them. And is there something new and brave that actually needs to be surfaced from this? And how do we lament and also have eyes to see what might be birthed in this? So for us, you know, again, going back to our peacemaking framework, see, immerse, contend, restore, opportunities of seeing the humanity, the dignity, the image of God in everyone. Some stuff I'm wrestling with right now personally is, you know, we often talk about seeing as a confessional process, a confessional practice, if you will, that it's less something we go do and more an opportunity for us to ask questions like, who have I been taught to see and who have I been taught not to see? And this is a moment, I think, more than ever, where we have an opportunity to examine our own biases, our own blind spots. We are being taught to see certain people and taught not to see certain people now in this moment, unique to this moment. And how are we having the awareness to see through that and beyond that, and then to invite other people to see beyond that? And, you know, the Asian American community right now, Asian community in general, is being targeted in ways that are unbelievable and antithetical to the way of Jesus, and antithetical to one who saw beyond every border and boundary and ethnicity. And so what does it mean for us to see through that fear that's being propagated towards us, the xenophobia, and then not just point fingers, oh, they're saying horrible things about those people, but what's the stuff in myself that I am cultivating a sense of blindness towards my other. And so personally, what are practices that guide us towards renewed sight in this moment? How are we having daily rituals in place to be able to see, again, not just our other, but to see ourselves and our own stuff that we're dealing with, of different people, everyone from Thomas Merton to Dayoud Nasser in Palestine have said something like, until we disarm the violence in ourselves, we can't disarm the violence of our world. And this is an opportunity for us to examine whatever is broken in us, whatever that violence is in us, that to deal with it, to go on this journey of confession and repentance so it doesn't continue to infect our world. On a neighborhood level, who's going unseen in our neighborhoods? How has my pursuit of safety grown up new blind spots towards those who need us in our lives? I mean, a really tangible practice that I find myself sitting on my front patio, and I'm seeing my street in different ways. Like, I'm going through, there's Tomas. Tomas is 98. I mean, this is like the epitome of the vulnerable community. And so I'm seeing him and thinking different kinds of questions about what it means to be his neighbor right now. You know, Remy down the street, who's in the vulnerable category. So what's a practice of literally just sitting on our patios and seeing, in the form of identifying the names and the stories of our neighbors, and saying, what does it mean to show up and to be present to them right now? And that can guide us towards immerse, which we'll go into next. But I think we first need to just have the eyes to see what's right in front of us. And globally, I think we're seeing our interdependence like never before. Go back and watch again that first webinar in the series and hear from these people across the globe. And it gives us the opportunity to pull our sight lines above our own crisis, our own insular reality, and see that we are an interdependent human family. And if we don't see ourselves as profoundly connected, we miss out on an opportunity of this moment to see beyond nation state systems and structures, beyond theological constructs, beyond race and ethnicity, and into a family that has a future that is connected to one another. So I think it's a beautiful opportunity for us to reimagine what a holistic peace, a shalom, looks like for us on a global level.
Awesome. Good stuff, bro. If thoughts or questions are coming to your mind, continue to populate those over into the comment section so we can interact. We'd also love to hear what are the opportunities that you're seeing and how are you taking advantage of them. Let's crowdsource some of our own kindness here and do some resource sharing in the comment thread. Would love to get your ideas in terms of what it is that y'all are doing to see Immerse attend more faithfully, or in this time, at least. I want to talk about the idea of immersion, and again, stepping off the road of comfort and into reality. And I want to preface this with just something that I've been convicted of in just some of my own reading over the last few months, recognizing that in the first century, followers of Jesus befuddled the empire because whenever there was catastrophe, we ran toward it. And so I want to preface this conversation about the opportunities around immersion, incarnation, proximity, faithful presence, with this idea that once upon a time we were known as a community of people who ran toward danger, and the only way to run toward danger is to literally rebel against, I think, the values of the system that we've been groomed in and have been given, these values of safety, as though we believe that God puts a high priority on our safety. Now, wisdom, let's be wise, but let's actually do some interrogation of our value of safety for a moment. And I want to draw your attention to part 2 of this, where Terrence Lester lives in Atlanta, and he tells stories of how he's recognized that our outdoor living community, like when one of the best ways to stave this off is to wash your hands, recognizing that the outdoor community doesn't have access to clean water and soap right now. So what are you gonna do? You know, for him, it looks like putting a mask on and bringing portable sinks and embedding them all throughout Atlanta. You know, and so at risk to his own health and to that of his family, but probably a life-saving measure for many who would suffer otherwise. And so the opportunities that I'm thinking about with regard to immersion, I want to do similar to what John just did in different kind of concentric circles. First of all, internally, how do we immerse deeper into ourselves in the moment? One of the things that we teach frequently is that 3 key questions for a contemplative everyday peacemaker is: whose am I, who am I, and what's mine to do today? Whose am I, who am I, and what's mine to do today? And so how do you immerse today, every day, deeper into this reality that we belong to God and to one another, that shapes who I am, and then that informs what is mine to do today? And so the contemplative space for me is giving me the opportunity to immerse deeper into myself. As I mentioned earlier, I don't spend a lot of time on the question, how am I doing? And so the contemplative practices, and for me, having 3 kids, waking up before them, it's a discipline. It's a requirement if I'm going to immerse deeper into myself in this time. And I also want to give a nod to what Haley is offering us all in these contemplative centering moments that happen virtually every single day. Contemplative solitude is a daily practice for me, but to do that in this moment in time with a bunch of other people, I didn't know how that was going to go. This morning I was on it and it was just incredible. And so you'll see the link in the comment thread. Tomorrow it happens at 12 o'clock. And so she's just facilitating this 30 minutes every day for us to immerse deeper into ourselves with one another. Other ideas or opportunities, if you have the option to continue therapy in this time, continue therapy, because moments of crisis till up the fields of our souls and reveal things. And so if you have an opportunity to continue therapy, do that right now. If spiritual direction is a tool that you've utilized, now is a great time to immerse deeper into yourself and into the God relationship that you have with that spiritual director. And we're happy to help to link you to some of the spiritual directors that our team really admires. Immersing interpersonally with my wife, with Jackie. It's a commitment of ours to take a neighborhood run once a day. We can still get out of our homes and run, and so that's something that we're doing once a day. And the discipline for us, because we're both type A, very, very intentional, detail oriented people, and the discipline for us in our daily run is that this is a time to connect with each other, and that's it. No analysis on the day or planning anything else. It's just a kind of a gut heart check with one another. To immerse into each other's lives is really critical right now. Immersing with kiddos. If you have kiddos, take advantage of this moment and embrace some unrushed presence with your kids. Immerse into their reality right now, recognizing that this is impacting them as well. It's not just about filling their time and keeping them on board and away from each other's throats. Like, this is a moment to deepen relationships between us and our kids with one another. And so some of the things that we're doing to help that, we're leveraging moments to teach them to immerse right now. Every morning we read global stories. We're looking at, we're identifying where on the globe these stories are coming from. We're seeing pictures. We're doing some research projects. So it's shaping how we're doing our homeschooling with our kids to get them immersed more into a global, our global family. We're doing different kinds of films with our kids throughout the week to immerse them into some of the realities that are, age appropriate, but immersing them into some of the realities in our world. We're utilizing food and our own menus differently, from different kinds of cuisine to different kinds of rations, just as in an effort to immerse in solidarity with other people around the world who are eating different kinds of foods in this time. So I think there's all sorts of ways that we can immerse with our kids. With friends, an idea would be leverage that stack of Christmas cards that you get every year, and whether you like hang them up on your, home or whatever you do with it, you paper clip them places, but grab a stack of those and see if you can set up some calls with people, and kind of use that as a new phone book of sorts to just establish and deepen interpersonal relationships with the loved ones in your lives. Learn from them. How are you doing? How are you navigating this? What are some of the ideas that that you're in trying to embrace to love well through this? With the global, immersing deeper within the global immersion community, we're just trying to be more accessible to you. And I think this is a part of it, is immersing into your homes right now in the form of this, just to be a source of encouragement and some crowdsourcing of how we actually live as everyday peacemakers in the moment. Immersing locally with my neighborhood. There's a Facebook group that's just connected to our neighborhood, and something that's been really important for us. And I don't know what your experience has been, but when we usually walk the neighborhood, we'll give the hi to the neighbors, except for people we might know a little bit more. Now it's amazing to watch the kinds of connections that are happening, standing about 6 feet apart from one another, and the honest questions, the way that people are immersing into each other's lives. So maybe allow yourself to be immersed, your life to be immersed into by your neighbors. What we're doing is finding different ways to connect neighbors with neighbors, and to make sure, especially the most vulnerable in our neighborhood, that they're aware of the Facebook group. So if this thing continues to move in the direction of more isolation or more quarantine, we can actually take good care of one another, So think about how you can establish, help organize, or join what's already happening in your neighborhood to make sure that people are immersing into each other's lives. Within the community, now's a great time to really be a source of encouragement. Draw near in the form of texts, calls, or Zoom calls, emails. Draw near the faith leaders, the nonprofit leaders, especially those doing the work among I think the most vulnerable among us. Immerse into insert encouragement. Let them know that you are with them from afar, that you're championing them and their work. That I think that's a way that we can immerse locally. And then globally, it's interesting how people are more accessible to one another. And so those people that you've run into or have connections with across the globe, especially in places of occupation, of pain, of poverty, if you have an opportunity to, again, immerse into their lives in the form of a Facebook message, or set up a call if they have access to that kind of technology, be with one another, expose your kids to each other's kids, and start to grow those relationships. I think those are ways that we can leverage these moments to immerse. So those are some ideas for us.
Thank you, Jer. Thank you for sharing. When it comes in terms of contending and what opportunities we have to contend for one another in this season, and which means to getting creative in love and to loving others and to walking in solidarity and yeah, contending for the flourishing of others. I think I particularly have seen opportunities I had not seen. I want to share a few. In terms of the more personal, I think things have risen up in me that actually allow me to understand others in ways that I have not been able to understand or to come in solidarity with or to be compassionate with others, that actually allow me to contend for others in different ways. And I think I'm a mother of a 2-year-old, almost 3-year-old kid, and I have other friends who are also moms of toddlers, and it's really hard, even if you're doing this with other people that are helping around the home. It's hard to have little ones around, and for me, it's been how do I actually contend for my mom friends who are with less help than I am, and in many ways, how can I love them creatively? And it's come up to see that I literally can pray for them every day, and I can check on them every day, and there's things that I'm able to do more intently in this season, just because there's also less interruptions of other things. Even though they're still very overwhelming, there's still a lot of information. There's an opportunity that's unique in this moment of being there for others, of contending for others, of loving others that are close to us. For Abiel and me, for our family, it's meant that we're sticking to putting our little one to bed early and having some time to connect later at night, and to actually create a rhythm around what does it mean to slow the day in terms of information, in terms of a lot of the anxieties maybe that have risen, and then have a time to pray together. We've always tried to do this, but sometimes it's been hard to do it in the dynamics of daily normal life. And now we've had an opportunity to be more more committed to this. And and I think also something that was very interesting, I'm part of a church that is in the margins of our city, and it's a very diverse church, which is not common. So it's diverse economically, racially, ethnically, and we also have a shelter in our church. So for us, as we were hearing the pastors preaching from the shelter, from the church this Sunday, he was talking about not only of the unique time that we're experiencing, but the fact that maybe half of the people in our church have informal jobs, and that's the reality in our country. More than half of the people actually have informal jobs. So he was saying, like, this is an opportunity for us to also figure out what does that mean. Maybe we need to consider saving up money and doing other things that have to do with around these issues. And I think for me and for Abiel and a couple of other friends who thinking about this, praying about this, we're like, oh, this is the time to start contending for our brothers and sisters in this church in this particular way. So we're opening up an account that is going to allow people to save a little money, but then that is going to allow to be a microfinancing like of sorts. And we have someone who knows all of this from our church who's starting to do this. So I mean, in the midst of really going really fast and doing a lot of things, we hadn't had a time to actually sit down and plan these things. But now with everything that's happening, this is something that we're being invited into. So I would say that there might be ways of contending or invitations that God is leading us into that we hadn't heard before. And I would invite us to actually lean into those things, to ask those questions. It does mean to get creative, and I love what Amy was saying in the beginning. One of the comments around it seems that sometimes we need to do either or, but at this moment there's a lot of tension that we need to hold, and contending for others means holding a lot of this tension in many ways. Of yes, I'm caring for us. I'm contending for those around me, and in my own household. Locally for the church, but then how am I also trying to contend and come in solidarity with others that I know who are in different parts? What does that mean? It might mean donating. It might mean money. It might mean being more committed to praying, to doing this. Yeah, and I mean, there's no formulas. I'm just talking very generally, but I think there are unique opportunities that God is opening up for us, and I think there it has to do also with listening and with being inspired, and not being not allowing ourselves to be um, no, I can't think of it in English, but anyway, yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Ale. That makes me think of again, Sammy Awad in the webinar last week talked about the need to be physically distanced from a social, responsibility perspective, but also the mandate to be generous for those of us that can be. That it really is like there are people that literally are going to be destitute and already are becoming that as a result of this. So those of us that have the opportunity to be generous in any way have that. Like contending looks very tangible right now. And I think you just gave us a ton of examples of what that could look like. And I'm grateful for that. It's good for us all to consider in this moment. I know I feel in myself this scarcity mentality creeping up more than ever of like, oh, I got to hang on to what's mine because we don't know what the future looks like. Let's wrestle with that and where that's coming from. And also let's interrogate our own privilege in relation to others who don't have the opportunity to even consider that question. And how are we generous in the midst of it? So thank you all. The interactions in the comments have been great. There's a level of engagement and curiosity and shared solidarity in this moment that I sense and we sense collectively. Jer and Ale for bringing yourselves as practitioners and as trainers into this moment is so important. And I want to remind us too that, we talked about the opportunities and the obstacles through the lens of see, immerse, and contend, these practices of everyday peacemaking. And we do it with this vision and this trust that restoration is still a reality, that it's a reality that has come and that is coming, and that there are mustard seeds of that reality that are growing up even in the midst of this pandemic. I think we could actually tell lots of stories of where we're seeing restoration right now, even though on a holistic cosmic level, it feels a bit far off. And so what are the tools to help us, again, lament is a great practice to help us hold that distance between the reality is and the reality that we trust that God is making to see all that will be restored. And so hold that vision, hold that hope with us, walk with us into that. We're committed to walk with you. Thanks for giving this time. A couple of you asked some questions about how to support global immersion in this time. I mean, the primary way is to stay connected in this way. And we really see this as a living, breathing community because it is. So continue to engage in this way. We're committed to get creative in this moment. Many of you know that the way that we function and do most of our training requires travel and gathering. Our immersion trips are 2 locations in community, and we've had to cancel all of them for the indefinite future, in at least in these next few months. And so we're experimenting with other ways to connect and to train. It also underscores the importance of our Embers community, which is a community of monthly donors who support this work. And so for you, thank you. You're funding this conversation. You're funding the conversations that are to come. If you feel compelled to join that community, that funding community, please do. It's critical right now. So thanks for considering that. Also want you to just remind you again, Haley will continue to guide us into these contemplative gatherings via Zoom. Keep us grounded and connected. Tomorrow at noon is the next one. On Thursday, we're having the 4th part of this Everyday Peacemaking in the Pandemic series come to you, where we ask, as Jer mentioned earlier, the question, how do we discern what's ours to do in all of this? And if there's 80 things we could do, what are the 1 or 2 that we actually need to say yes to? Reverend Leroy Barber is going to help us with that, as is Pastor Kathy Escobar, friends, practitioners who are living this stuff out right now. So we're going to tear into that question with them. To stay connected to global immersion, text PEACE to the number 66866. We have an ongoing series of resources that are coming out of these conversations that'll be sent right to your inbox, along with a 30-day pathway for practice. So if you haven't done that already, text PEACE to 66866. There's links in the comments to everything I just mentioned. We're grateful for you. We're in this together, in the obstacles, the opportunities, the ambiguity. May we find some peace and levity in the midst of it all. So much love to you all, and we'll see you tomorrow and then again on Thursday in different ways. Bye-bye.